Hello and welcome. This is Latitude at Frontline. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will attend the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting tomorrow, that is Tuesday, the 1st of July. And officials in India's Commerce Department are in Washington, D.C., negotiating with their American counterparts to finalize a trade deal. Will they be able to arrive at an agreement by July 9th, the deadline that President Trump has set to begin implementing his April 2nd tariffs, or the so-called Liberation Day tariffs, after a 90-day pause? Will President Trump visit India later this year to attend a summit of the Quad leaders? Where exactly are India's relations with the United States at this point? I'm Nirupama Subramanian, and with me to discuss these questions is the esteemed journalist Seema Sirohi. She has been in Washington, D.C. for over 3 decades, first as a correspondent for the Telegraph newspaper, and for several years now as a columnist for the Economic Times. Her dispatches from D.C. are sharp, newsy, and analytical, and her book, Friends with Benefits, the India-US Story, published by HarperCollins, is a richly detailed book written from a place of deep knowledge, years of reportage, observation, and assessment of the ups and downs in the relationship. Seema Sirohi, welcome to Latitude. There is no better person to throw light on some of the pressing questions about India-US relations as they are today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Nirupama. It's a pleasure.
Seema, let me start with the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting, because they're meeting tomorrow. Minister Jaishankar will attend that meeting. But the sense one gets is that the Quad is really not on top of the Trump administration's mind right now. Can we talk about that a bit?
Sure. You're right. The foreign minister is here in New York already. He will be in Washington tomorrow. We have to remember that the very first international engagement that the Trump administration did on January 21st was the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting. And in fact, it was the first meeting Secretary of State Rubio had. You're also right that it doesn't seem to be like in the forefront. But right now, President Trump himself is very preoccupied with the developments in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine. He's also got a deal in Africa with Congo. So he's got a lot going on. And yes, he hasn't himself articulated anything about the Quad, but when he met the Prime Minister in February, when Narendra Modi was here, there was a big joint statement that came out, and there was a very positive mention of the Quad and how that would be taken forward. So right now, when the ministers meet, they're going to work out the date, hopefully, for the Leaders Summit, which is supposed to be later in the year, October, maybe November. There is a sense that the US has some difficulties with the other three Quad partners, right? So with Japan, there was a sudden kind of demand to increase the defense budget from 3% of the GDP to 3.5%.
The US was making that demand.
Correct. And that led to the cancellation, some people say, of the 2+2 dialogue between Japan and the US. In terms of Australia, the other Quad member, the Defense Department of the US has launched a review of AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, US grouping to transfer nuclear-powered submarines to Australia. That was supposed to be a big security move by the Biden administration. That is under review, which has caused some unease in Australia. So then with India, we have some issues, political issues that came up in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor. So it's all this in the background. We shall see how this foreign ministers meeting sort of takes place, whether they are able to um, lay to rest some of these doubts.
So one of the things that comes to mind is that the Quad, the members of the Quad, that is, you mentioned Japan and Australia, and of course the US, when Operation Sindoor took place, when India launched that attack into Pakistan, the Quad members were quiet. They had, of course, offered their condemnation and uh, their severe condemnation of the attack at Pahalgam. But when the strikes took place, they were silent. And considering that, there's so much talk about how Chinese hardware helped and software helped Pakistan, handle some of the initial parts of the attack. Um, is there going to be? Are we going to see Mr. Jaishankar actually take this up at the Quad about why the silence of the Quad during Operation Sindoor?
He might do that in a bilateral setting with individual foreign ministers, since all three will be here, the Japanese, the Australian, and the Indian foreign ministers. At the level of the Quad, what I think India might try to do in the statement is to try to get stronger language against terrorism. Now, as for Quad not issuing a statement, like as a grouping, I think the explanation might be that it's not a security grouping. It's, and because it's not a security grouping, and that's because India hasn't wanted it that way, especially the US, has pushed for it to take more of a security role in the Indo-Pacific. They might counter India with that look, you only don't want us to, talk about all these things. Now, Operation Sindoor, once India launched the military operations, I think everybody went into the default position of de-escalate, because that's something the West always says whenever there is a prospect of a war. Then there is some real major concern, especially in the US, and the Pakistanis played up to that, which is about nuclear war, it turning into a nuclear exchange. While India has said that it was way below the nuclear threshold, the Pakistanis played that up. So that led to the Americans getting very nervous that, it could result into something worse. So I think that's how I might look at it.
Right. So you also mentioned that they're going to nail down the date for the next Quad summit. Uh, but there's also a sense that the Quad summit the original date for that was perhaps November this year, but there seems to be a sense that it may not take place in November as, President Trump's advisors and his officials are not really talking about the summit right now. Uh, so where do you think that could be headed, the summit itself? Do you think it might take place at all this year?
Right, it might, depending on developments in the Middle East. But you're right that the focus of the Trump administration is on a different part of the world right now. And Quad is not like up front and center. The hope is it'll take place in October, November, but it is also true that the Trump administration declined to commit itself to a time frame for the summit when Prime Minister Modi was here. So that led to some speculation that the Americans were trying to get something in return, like first get a trade deal going, make the concessions the Americans want India to make, and then we'll talk about actually going over to India. Some people say that these are people who are talking to the Pentagon. They say that they're not focused on the Quad, the Pentagon, which was surprising to me. So it's all very unclear. Then US policy towards China, that's another unknown
Yeah, I
unknown.
was going to come to that. In fact, there are reports that Trump might visit China soon. In fact, he said that he's already concluded an agreement with China. He had this long conversation with President Xi Jinping, and he said he had been invited to China, and that he had invited in turn President Xi Jinping to the US. So, I mean, one of the reasons. That he's so standoffish about the Quad? Could it be also that he wants to make nice with China and have this G2 summit as is being talked about, where he visits China with this entourage of business people like he did when he went to the Middle East? Is that why you think he's also holding back?
It could be one of several reasons. You're right that the policy towards China is a mixture of confusing signals. We don't know whether he really considers China as a rival. There is so little structure in policy making in the US right now under this administration that it's very hard to sort of read the tea leaves. It's only the president who decides, and he says something, then the rest of the administration tries to sort of fit the policy into his words. It's not the other way around. It's not like the policy determining what should be said by the president. So, whether the G2 is real, I don't know. It is very difficult to say. But he has announced a trade deal with China, under which China will lift the controls on critical minerals, and America will allow some of the semiconductor chips to go to China. So, yes, a deal is first and foremost, no matter which country, what time, and where.
Right. Which brings me really to India. Right now, India's priority is the trade agreement that is being negotiated before this deadline of July 9th. Trump has already talked about the fact that he is going to have a very big deal with India. And the hint in that seemed to be the subtext, or whatever you choose to call it, is that India is going to grant some major concessions to American exports. What are you hearing about how close or how distant we are from this deal, from an India-US trade deal? And what do you think are the stumbling blocks towards finalizing it?
See, the trade deal, people are very optimistic in Washington that something will be announced before the deadline, before these tariffs are supposed to come on. Now, the thing is that before Operation Sindoor and all of the political difficulties that it created for New Delhi, India had made some very forward-leaning proposals, and things were going fine. But the last round, I hear, was rather difficult because the Americans added new demands, perhaps because their deal with China was going well. So they felt that this is a good time to get something more out of India. So, of course, the sensitive parts are the agriculture areas. India wants to protect small farmers. The Americans want more market access for soya bean, for maize, and other products.
Agricultural products, basically.
Yes, exactly. So, US also wants India to open up to GMO foods, the genetically modified foods, and lower prices on medical devices. This is a demand that the Americans had made in the first Trump administration as well, when it seemed like the two countries were close to a deal. But the Modi government then had taken a very strong stance on medical devices. They felt that we couldn't be selling these, very expensive American-made products when we can make in India, or that they have to lower the prices. The Americans have to. So these difficulties remain. I think they 90% chance maybe that there will be an announcement, but details of what exactly is in the deal may not be revealed upfront. So we'll be kept guessing.
Because of the political reckoning.
Because maybe they haven't agreed, because negotiations are still going on. Because in terms of the China deal, they announced a very basic deal, right? There are no details that have been revealed. So they might do something similar in the India case as well.
Right. So, you talked about Operation Sindoor and how, in the wake of that, there have been so many difficulties in the relationship itself. Um, so, how do you see India-US ties developing in general? Uh, just a year ago, at this time, there was so much enthusiasm in both governments on both sides about this relationship, that it's sort of going, it's uh, breaking every barrier, and it's sort of going forth, and it's going to be this great relationship of the 21st century and all that. Now, not so much, and even in India, and especially in India. So, what has changed and why? You said Operation Sindoor. What about that actually changed this relationship?
Okay,
If
so
it did, if it
uh,
did change the relationship.
if you'll permit me, I think it's important to go back to the Biden administration, during which the first 3 years of Biden went extremely well. Everything was hunky-dory. Excuse me. There was a technology agreement, lots and lots of things were going on in the defense relationship. The last year of the Biden administration, that is 2024, things went awry in terms of two, three developments. There was this whole Khalistan issue that came up, right? So the US indicted a former intelligence agent of India for allegedly playing a role in the foiled attempt to assassinate a US-based Khalistani. Then the Canadians had a similar situation. Uh, India felt that US and Canada were acting in sync. Things went south. Then there was an indictment against Gautam Adani, the big industrialist. So there was a sense in the ecosystem in India, the right-wing ecosystem, that Trump is going to be the savior. He's going to come and just rescue the relationship out of these doldrums. Uh, then things went well. Prime Minister Modi came in February, and there was quite a solid joint statement. All the initiatives that Biden had started continued under another
Yeah.
name. The technology cooperation, AI, quantum, defense relationship. So there was a sense things were going okay. Then came the Pahalgam terror attack and India's military response. Uh, Then President Trump started to hyphenate Pakistan and India and took repeated, claims that he made repeated claims that he brokered the ceasefire, created a lot of political difficulties for the Modi government. And then the ecosystem that is in New Delhi, the digital warriors, whatever you want to call them, they went from one extreme to the other. Trump as a savior to Trump as a traitor to the cause. And even though the US response, I would argue, was pretty predictable. After the attack, the US condemned the attack in strong terms and respected India's right to respond. Then India responded, and then it was de-escalate, which is the default position of all American administrations. Uh, the X factor was President Trump, because he decided that this is something he can grab onto for his own political ends domestically. He wants to be known as the peace president. So he said, oh, I stopped this war. They were coming to a nuclear exchange. I stopped it, and both are great countries. So he started to give as much importance to Pakistan as India felt it had in the ecosystem. And then the invitation to Asim Munir, the Field Marshal of Pakistan, that really caused some unease in Delhi. And people felt that Trump was actually trying to get the prime minister to come also at the same time so he could put them in the same room. And that really left a sour taste. So that's where we are at the political level. There are some wrinkles, but I think at the institutional level, things are fairly okay.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that so the shift that we see in the mood, this is just, you're saying, is just a Trumpian shift. It doesn't really have to do with the institutions that formulate foreign policy. So it's not in the long term.
Not in the long term, because in terms of the strategic partnership, I think the Americans do understand, including hopefully President Trump, that India is an important partner in the Indo-Pacific. And without India, some of the things cannot be done. So I'm more optimistic in the long term. I understand the difficulties. President Trump's tendency to talk in a certain way have created for New Delhi.
But do you think there was any truth to what he was saying about, I read the Riot Act to both India and Pakistan. I threatened to cut off trade on both sides with both countries unless it came to a ceasefire. And he keeps repeating this. He has repeated it so many times, and his biggest grouse is that nobody is writing about it. Nobody's done a story about it. So how do you, I mean, he has said it so many times now. So, would he say it so many times without there being some element of truth in that?
There was some telephone diplomacy done by the Americans that was important. They were passing messages. The phone call between Vice President Vance and Prime Minister Modi was an important one, in which Modi apparently said to Vance that if they hit us, we'll hit them harder. So those messages were passed. And then Marco Rubio, Secretary of State and also the National Security Advisor, he is in a dual hat position right now. He was having conversations with the Pakistanis and with the Indian Foreign Minister. That surely the Americans did. They passed on messages, but I don't know. Nobody can tell you for sure whether what President Trump was told, perhaps to make him feel important. Rubio might have told him that, yes, we stopped this thing. And then Trumpian exaggeration, his tendency to put himself at the center of everything. Remember, he also said he will stop the war between Ukraine and Russia in 24 hours. And we are now into the 6th month of his administration. He I don't know how to put it diplomatically or more politely. He tends to exaggerate his own role, his own importance in the scheme of things. I am more persuaded by the timeline provided by the Indian side and how after India attacked the 7, 8 air bases of Pakistan, the Pakistanis felt that their air defenses had been breached. Therefore, they were vulnerable and they wanted the war to stop.
Right,
But of course, they claimed victory as well.
right. So we'll see how that goes, as I mean, how many more times he repeats it and what kind of impact it has. But I wanted to ask you what you make of the argument by Ashley Tellis in his latest paper for Carnegie Endowment. And as we know, Ashley Tellis was in the Bush administration, and he's in the think tank now. And he has written a similar thing earlier, some years back, but now his argument is that India will never be a great power uh, because it can't catch up with China. It remains uh, suspicious of the US unipolarity, and it wants a multipolar world. So its inability to actually come to terms with American supremacy also will prevent it from sort of uh, uh, deepening its friendship with the US, and therefore it'll affect its response to China. And C, he says the erosion of democratic values in India and the assault on liberal secularism by Hindutva is also a reason. Uh, Basically, he's saying, yeah, uh, it can be a big power, but it can never it won't have that heft in the world that it seeks. So is this a widely held view? Mr. Tellis is a Republican. He's not a Trump Republican, but he's a Republican of the old kind. So who does he speak for here?
Okay, so there has been a gradual shift in Ashley Tellis's position from 2018 to now, and it's got more and more critical gradually of India and of Indian policies. The last article he wrote was about a scenario where if China were to take Taiwan, India would not join the Americans. And therefore, that's a problem. Now he's taken on multipolarity. I'm not entirely convinced that because India argues for multipolarity, it is against US leadership automatically. It's not. I think to anyone who has watched US-India relations or Indian foreign policy in general, India is more comfortable with US leadership than it would be with Chinese leadership or any other. So I'm not sure that automatically follows. His analysis about why India may not rise as fast or as well and become a strong pole in itself, that I take, that, you know,
That it can't economically catch up with China.
yes, because China has got way ahead and India has struggled on so many fronts. And now India faces, on the defense front, India faces possibility of a two-front war, etc. So, yes, I take his point that without US help, if there were to be a two-front situation for India, India might not fare that well. India does need US help. India has never denied that. The defense relationship between the US and India is one of the strongest pillars of this relationship. When other things have gone wrong at political level or we've had some real major hurdles and bumps on the road, the defense partnership has kind of gone on very well and gotten stronger and stronger. So I don't know why Ashley, whom I respect deeply and I've known for 30 years, has become so critical of India. Yes, I agree about the illiberalism, but then I look at America all around me. It's not exactly a liberal place right now. It's most polarized. It's very unwelcoming to immigrants overall. It's facing its own headwinds. I don't know if America will be what it is supposed to be 5 years down the line. So when you take all these things into perspective, I find his criticism a little too severe.
But it's also true
I
that
am
there
not
is.
an expert, like a defense expert or an economic expert. I am basically a journalist.
No, but what I was coming to say was that it's also true, as you pointed out, that in the right-wing ecosystem right now, there's so much suspicion of the US and its intentions um, because of what happened post Operation Sindoor, and uh, even when the Biden administration was in charge, there was talk about how within the RSS there was talk about how when Trump comes, he's going to actually he's going to sink the US, and it'll be China, Russia, and India that will take center stage in the whole in the world. And so there is talk of this, and there's also so much suspicion that the regime change in Bangladesh was actually carried out by the CIA. Even the regime change in Sri Lanka was carried out by the CIA. So that the US doesn't want India to be the regional power either. So there is a suspicion within India that US acts against Indian interests a lot of the time, and that we are too much. And then there is also the criticism from other quarters that we are too much in the US corner for us even to be able to take a stand on international issues um, such as the war in Gaza, or on Iran, or any of those big issues. So would you say that that thing is actually, in that sense, Tellis is not far uh, from the truth in what he's saying, that there's so much suspicion that we don't want to accept that the fact that US leads and we follow, and it's true. Why should we?
Right. So yes, there is suspicion India as like an ex-colonized country has deep suspicion of the West, right? And I think part of, I would argue, the idea of multipolarity partly comes from that sense also, that why should India follow any one camp? Where it should be its own camp. It should be its own pole. Yes, I get that. And but just to counter, to be contrarian a little bit, yes, one should be suspicious of deep state and all of that, and CIA is not known for the best things or throughout history. But at the same time, look at what has happened to India and the Russia relationship. That also is going through some very difficult patches, right? Um, I believe the foreign minister of Russia did not meet the Indian parliamentary delegation when they went to Moscow to explain Operation Sindoor. The Russians have supported the Chinese position in the UN many times. So what does it tell us? You're basically on your own in this today's world, which is in complete flux, and you do the best you can with any country you can that has the technological prowess that you want, the defense equipment that you want to buy, so that you can protect yourself. I mean, it's a simplistic sounding argument, but you have to deal with almost everybody. It's a very difficult world today.
That's true. So if the relationship with the US needs to be salvaged from this point where it is now, of some distrust created by President Trump, who in the Trump administration is going to do that? Is there anybody in the Trump administration? I mean, earlier in the previous administrations, there was Jake Sullivan, there was uh, Donald Lu, and in the previous Trump administration, it was Lisa Curtis. So who's there now who's actually saying, we need this relationship to improve. We need to push this relationship. Who are the people in the Trump administration who do that? Is there any one person with a solid interest in India?
See, right now, there isn't anyone that comes to mind. There's no so-called champion of the relationship in the White House. I mean, at most, we have the senior director for South Asia, gentleman called Ricky Gill, and but to understand how the system works under this administration is everyone is a loyalist. So Trump has to be the champion of the relationship, and the others will adjust. Nobody, I think, has the courage in this administration to take a stand on any country, not just India, any country, and say, no, President Trump, you're wrong. Actually, we should have a better relationship with X, Y, or Z country. Nobody has that, not Secretary Rubio, not Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon. He's the defense secretary. I'm hoping that when Paul Kapoor, he's an academic, he's supposed to be Assistant Secretary of State. He's had his confirmation hearing in the Senate, and he hasn't been confirmed yet, but he should take up his position soon. He knows the region well. He has domain expertise. That he would bring some solid sort of knowledge of the region and take it to the White House when there are interagency meetings. But right now, the process, there is hardly any process. It's not as if policy is being made from bottom up, like in normal times. It's being made top down. Trump says something, everyone accommodates, adjusts, and starts saying the same thing. Whether it's different and one correction, or I have a different point of view. I wouldn't call Don Lu as one of the champions of the India relationship under Biden. Jake Sullivan, yes. Kurt Campbell, yes. But Don Lu was hardly a champion of the India relationship. He was more a champion of other countries. He's credited with certain developments in Pakistan that
Right.
were controversial.
So, I just quickly want to ask you one last question because we really don't have much time. And that's about, you spoke about immigration, and, you don't know what the future is going to look like in America itself 5 years down the line with so much that's happening, illiberal things that are happening. So I just want to ask very quickly about Zohran Mamdani and the extraordinary panic that he has set off about an imminent immigrant takeover of New York, and even the but there's so much else around it, Islamophobia, anti-immigration, and even the Indian diaspora is loath to celebrate his success in winning the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York. Um, this should have been the big immigrant moment for India as well, and we are not really celebrating it. What are your thoughts on this?
So Zohran Mamdani had a very successful campaign. He ran a very vibrant, attractive campaign. He's a very attractive candidate. But forget the Indian diaspora. Even the Democratic Party leadership has not embraced him.
Yes.
They are being polite, but they're keeping their distance because they don't see this as the way out of the morass they are in, right? They need to defeat the Republicans in the midterm elections. So this kind of extreme left face for the party may not be the answer, is what they are thinking. So every leader, and most recent one was Hakeem Jeffries. He's the ranking, Democrat in the House of Representatives. And he didn't sort of say, oh, wow, what a great victory. He's the new face of the Democratic Party. No, none of that. They're just keeping their distance. They either make an excuse that we are focused on something else, we have other races to win. They don't comment on, what a great campaign he ran, etc. There is also a division in the South Asian community, in the Indian diaspora especially, because he has said some very harsh things about the Indian Prime Minister. Then he has said things like he would not allow Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, to enter New York. That has kind of polarized things. But he won on the plank of affordability. That really resonated with people. So he wants to give free bus rides, freeze the rents, tax the rich. Okay, do that. But what if the rich flee to New Jersey or to Connecticut, to other states, to Florida, which has been happening? Because New York is the highest sort of taxed place country. Plus, he needs the agreement of the governor of New York in order to raise taxes, in order to get the money to do all these great things he wants. So yeah, I'm going to watch and see. Right now it's just the primary level and the turnout was low. He got the white liberal vote. He did not get the African American vote. He got the uncles and aunties from South Asia, yes. So there is some unease about his candidacy. Let's see what happens in the real election in November.
Well, I think that's a pity that there's so much unease about him, because I personally liked the fact that a young person has made it to become the Democratic nominee. Uh, Seema Sirohi,
I just want to add, we are at a time where there is so much suspicion of immigrants that the Democratic Party itself is worried about embracing an immigrant candidate.
right? That's a real pity, actually. Seema Sirohi, thank you so much for your thoughts and your insights on the US-India relationship and so much else besides. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.